So thank you for the warm welcome. I'm very happy to be here. And I would like to start my keynote with a question. And the question is, what if that was the last year of your life? If with that knowledge you go into the dark of the night, and when the sun rises tomorrow, would you continue to live as you do? You know, I was faced by that question a few years ago. I was sitting at the room of my doctor and he said, if that is a tumor, and he did a movement like that, pointing to my head. And then there was silence and he looked to the side and there was nothing except the clicking of a clock. And it ticked one time, it ticked the second time, and I just prepared myself to hear the third tick. And then the doctor continued and said, let's think positive. And he had that fake smile on his face. And it was in that moment when the assistant entered the room and he gave him a note and he said, oh, that's good, that's good. And then he looked at me and he said, we could arrange an emergency appointment for you tomorrow. And I think I looked at him like that. And he said, don't worry about the word emergency. We will just check that everything's okay. And then he just stood up, and maybe you know that movement, like one hand on the arm, the other one on the back, telling you, go out and take your problem with you. I don't know how I got home that day, but when I was home, I decided I need a second opinion. And I opened my laptop and I asked Dr. Google. I asked for suddenly being blind on one side and cancer. And after only a few minutes, everything that I could see was dying, death, dying, death. And I just closed my laptop and my hands started to shiver. And I tried to breathe. And then I had that voice in my head asking, what's your problem with death? It's a part of life. And I screamed inside. I said, but not now. But that voice stayed hard and asked, why not? And suddenly I said, I want to see this, I want to do that, I want to experience that. And then the voice asked a question that still dominates and steers my life today. The next morning I went to the MRT and I started to do something which I did at that day for the very first time. And I said to the universe, if you give me a good diagnosis, I promise I will change my life. And I did get a good diagnosis, and I changed my life. I started to do the things on my list. I started to change. And today I want to talk to you about change. I want to talk to you about overcoming routines, overcoming patterns, and living change. And why change? Already Charles Darwin said, it's not the one who is the strongest or the most intelligent. It's the one that is best capable to adapt to changes that will survive. And when we talk about change, I think everyone wants to change. Everyone wants change, if we are correctly. But no one wants to change him or herself, because we are complaining all the time. But when we are faced with having to change, we feel overwhelmed, we feel fear, and it's just when we stand with our back to the wall, as I did just several years ago, that we are ready to change. If we are faced with the finiteness of life, with the finiteness of a relationship, with the finiteness of a job relationship, that we are ready to change. And Steve Jobs once said, death is very likely the single best invention of life. He even said it's a gift to life, because he said, only if we realize that our life is finite, we start to use every day. And I would like to recommend a book to you that is called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. It was written by a palliative nurse, and she asked the people she accompanied to, let's face it, to death. What do you regret most in your life? And I would like to give you a few minutes to think about that. Since we have two brain hemispheres, you can decide whether you would like to think about that question with your analytical one or with your emotional one, and you can stay with me with the other side. And I'm sure I will tell you the 5 regrets in a few seconds, but I'm sure that if you think of your own life, you will find some of these 5 points. But if we know that, why are we not doing that? And I would like to introduce a word, and I'm sure you know that. It's the comfort zone. And the comfort zone, when we talk about it from a physical perspective, is that part of the sofa where you sink in the most. It's the most comfortable one. What is the problem? It's also that area of the sofa where it's the hardest to get up again. When we come to the mental perspective, the comfort zone is that area in our life where we feel well, where we feel comfortable, where we know what is expected from us, where we know that we can cope with the challenges. And sometimes we even dare to leave that comfort zone. If we imagine it as an island, sometimes the water is sparkling and we are interested to find out what's there, maybe on another island. So the motivation to leave the comfort zone must be a very, very high one. Curiosity, the wish for growth and for development. But sometimes we are also kicked off the comfort zone if somebody finishes a relationship with us. Our health, our body, our boss, our partner, whatever. But it doesn't matter whether we decide to leave the comfort zone or whether we are kicked out. Whenever we leave it, around that comfort zone comes the fear zone. It's something like, okay, from here, from my beach, the water looks nice, but if I go there, it feels so cold. The important thing is the fear zone is there always, even if we decide to change things, if we decide to leave the comfort zone, because within the comfort zone, there's one thing that never happens, and that is change. And when we are in the fear zone, we feel overwhelmed, we feel shocked sometimes, we just want to go back to the comfort zone. And then we need conscious awareness to say, okay, I know I'm in the fear zone now, and I need to continue. And then if we do so, we can reach the learning zone. We have our first success stories and we feel, okay, that change was not so hard as I expected it, or as I just experienced it while I was in the fear zone. And then finally, we can reach the growth zone. And we are not doing that once in a lifetime. So it's not leaving the comfort zone of our mommy and then that's it. So we are leaving the comfort zone again and again and again. So one day the growth zone is our new comfort zone. Or as Neil Donald Walsh says, life starts, and I'm sure you saw that on a postcard already, out of your comfort zone. And now let's get back to the top 5 regrets of the dying. So we are always thinking, I have so much time still. I will do that tomorrow, I will do that next weekend, or whatever. So just compare what you had in your mind while you was thinking of that question in comparison to what is on the book. The thing that was mentioned the most is, I wish I had the courage to be myself instead of living a life that others expected from me. I wish I had not worked so much. And whenever I give that speech at BMW, I have to delete that line. But I've been responsible for HR analytics for a long time, and then I had only 4, but they said it need to be 5, so I had to decide whether to admit that there is something that I don't dare to say or whether I cannot count. So the third thing, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in contact with my friends. And last but not least, I wish I had allowed myself more moments of true joy. And who found some of these things in his own brain? So as Coco Chanel said, that I regret nothing in life except for what I didn't do. And thank you for your hands. If you know that already, why are you not doing that? Why are we all not doing that? Of course, because we think we have so much time still. But why do we think now it's not the right time? And I think the word think is somehow the clue, because our thoughts create our reality. And maybe you heard that as well, or you saw that on a postcard. Mind your thoughts, they become your words. Mind your words, they become your actions. Mind your actions, they become your habit. But if we look at that from a less philosophical way, if we look at our reality is created by our decisions, whether to be here or not to be here, whether to marry or not, to build a home, to have children, whatever. Or even the small things like what to eat today. Even that creates our reality. I know what I'm talking about because I was suffering from food poisoning the last 2 weeks, so that was a bad decision regarding food. But most of our decisions are steered by our feelings, and not some feelings, but specific feelings, and feelings come from past experiences, and that is a specific area of thought. So what does that mean? It's impossible to create a new reality with the same thoughts. So as long as we continue to think that we cannot do that today, we cannot change our reality. But let's have a look into the physics of our thoughts. So why is there written Hello Newton? Because we are thinking in a Newton way. How do we think? For example, if I finish that project, I will have more time. If I have that amount of money on my bank account, I will be rich. If I lose that amount of kilogram, I will be beautiful. If I get that job, I will be successful. What does that mean? We are thinking, and now we come to Newton, in cause and effect. But what does that mean additionally? That we make ourselves dependent on things that happen in our outer environment. Things that we cannot control, things that we cannot steer, but we are slaves to that outer environment. Our emotional well-being depends on things that we cannot control. And that seems, or sometimes sounds, a little bit sad or frustrating, but the truth is many of us feel quite well exactly in that state. Why? Because we are not guilty. We can point to others to say, I could not do that because of my husband, my boss, destiny, life, whatever. So it's so much easier to just complain instead of changing things. But the problem is, if we complain, does anything change? Exactly, nothing changes. It doesn't help us. So what is the thing to do? It is to find a response to the situation. And I really like that word, responsibility. The ability to respond. So it's our responsibility to deal with these things. So stop finding others to complain about, or situations, or life itself, and start to take over the responsibility for your life. So you can lock the rooster away, but the sun will rise anyway. And then let's go one step further, and we are staying within physics. We are all energy. I don't know whether you feel like that on a Friday morning, but from a physical perspective, we are all energy, and energy moves in waves. And scientists found out that the frequency of the waves depend on our emotional well-being or not well-being. So if we are stuck in bad emotions, our frequency is quite low. If we experience good feelings, we frequency very high. And another thing that is really important, I don't want to dive too much into quantum physics. If we wave in a certain frequency, we attract situations and people that frequency in the same frequency wave. So what does that mean? If you look at the world with bored eyes, it can never be interesting. And I was a silent listener of a discussion between 3 people in our canteen just a while ago, and one man said, that was such an exhausting Saturday. I had to work whole day even though my children wanted to play with me. My wife complained about that I'm here in my working room. And then the other man said, you did that only on Saturday. I did that on Saturday and Sunday. And the third man took his time, cleaned his mouth with his napkin, and he said, gentlemen, I've been doing that for more than half a year now. And that discussion could be everywhere. I had the same discussion with teachers on a teacher birthday. So one said how hard life for teachers is, and then they all continued. And I just thought, oh my God, the poor birthday child, that all the people are only complaining at the birthday. I was just looking there, and he was in the middle of, oh my God. So, if one starts, it's so easy to get into that. So, how can we change that? And where do all these bad thoughts come from? And as I just said, and Dr. Joe Dispenza is a quantum physician who specialized on personal development. Emotions are the end product of past experience. And if you go back in what you remember from your previous years, then it will be those moments that had an emotional impact that you will be able to remember. And these past experiences steer our daily life. And the problem is it happens in our subconsciousness. So we are only a program. By the age of 35, more than 90% of what we are experiencing while we are awake is only a program. And don't get me wrong, routines are good sometimes. Imagine we would say every 10 seconds, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. We would not do anything else. But sometimes we are controlled by our routines. So for example, imagine on Monday, you just leave the alarm at the same time and just sit up. It's not allowed to stay in bed, sit up, and only if you're not a meditator. You stay there seated. And then your brain says, what are you doing here? It's so stupid. Kathleen, what she told on Friday, why? You have appointments, you have a dog, you have a cat, you have children. There will be a traffic jam if you don't get up now. And if you overcome these thoughts, then your brain has some other ideas telling you need to pee, you're hungry, it's cold, it's warm, or there is an imaginary fly crawling on your arm. Try to tell to your body and tell your routines, you and me, we stay here seated until I tell you to get up. It's so hard. And what happens if we get up? So, for example, we lay in bed and we think of what to dress. Or let's start with a shower. And suddenly we are under the shower and we don't know how we get there. And then we think of what to dress, and suddenly we are dressed. We just put on our second sock and we think of a coffee, and suddenly we have a cup of coffee in our hand. We think, who did that? And then we think of, oh, hopefully there will be no traffic jam today on my way to work. And suddenly we are there and we're thinking, was there a traffic jam today at all? And so we continue to think and live in these routines. And sometimes, of course, they give us secureness, but sometimes it does not help us if we would like to create a new personal reality. So we need conscious awareness to realize those patterns and routines. Otherwise, we cannot break them. If we don't break them, we cannot change. And why is it so hard? It's because of our brain. Because normally we would say, okay, then let's think something else. What's the matter? The problem is that in the past, our brain, or still our brain, needs fat. But in the past, fat was not available. So that's why you sometimes maybe hear eat nuts. Eat nuts is good for your brain. But somehow our brain did not realize that today, if you go to the supermarket, there is fat everywhere. So our brain still wants to save energy. And how can the brain save energy? If it focuses on things that it already knows. So from 6 million information offers that we get every day, only 1% goes into our conscious awareness. And these are the things we already know. So that means if, for example, in the past, as you remember, I talked about emotions and how emotions steer our behavior. If we had bad emotions, then our brain tries to avoid these situations. It does not start to re-evaluate that situation. It just thinks, oh, in the past that was painful, so we avoid that. And it always seeks for good situations. But what does that mean? When we are children, we have that broad opportunities to live life. And the more bad emotions we store, the narrower our life focus gets, because we want to avoid that, that was painful, that hurt, there I felt fear, whatever. If we give our brain the power to do so. And moreover, and that is quite important, our brain confirms what we expect to happen. Our brain does not focus on a reality that we wish. Our brain focuses on a reality that we expect to happen. So for example, you are asked to hold a keynote here, and you think before, oh my God, that will be a mess. And then you go here, and your brain confirms that it will be a catastrophe, because otherwise you leave the stage, people applaud, and you think, how did that happen? And your brain hates to be asked questions, because then it needs to work. It just would like to have something like, I knew that before, okay, let's go to daily business. So that is something to really, really train. And how can we do that? There is one process to change. And the important thing, it's just written there, don't believe everything you think. So there is one thing that helps us to install new neuronal networks, because that is what is needed. We need new ways of thinking. And do you know about that process? If we talk about that process, there's just one process that has nothing else as a target than creating new neuronal networks. It is learning. If we learn something, we want to create new neuronal networks. So if we look at learning, we've been at school for 10 years, 12 years, 13 years, or even at university, and afterwards we were unable to live, isn't it? So we couldn't read contracts or all these things that we need for life. And on the other hand, we touched a hot cook plate one time, and we never did that before. So if today we would like to change, and we would like to change quickly, of course we cannot touch cook plates all the time. But in my company, and I'm sure you also experience that, we often talk about knowledge. We often talk about know-how. Sometimes we even confuse these things. But what we never talk about is the know-why. But the know-why is our hot cook plate. So if you found that why, it's so easy to learn. Or as already Friedrich Nietzsche said, if you have your why in life, you can tolerate almost every how. So if we know that now, and I put that slide at the end, we are standing here on that fork every day, and every day we can decide to take the left or the right way. And at the first days after we took that decision, we think it doesn't matter which way to take, because we can change so easily. Who of you does sports regularly? And sometimes maybe you experience something like, okay, there was Christmas, there was New Year, and then you go in front to the mirror and you say, oh wow, how did that happen? And then you have that good intentions for New Year, and you're searching on YouTube for a video, and you find a very good one, 6-pack in 6 minutes. And you get into your sports dress and you power 6 minutes, and then you run to the mirror. Nothing changed. Why? And of course we know that, and you're laughing. But if we continue to do that every day, and you do that training, that 6 minutes training, for a period of 30 times, of 60 times, of 90 days, then of course there will be a difference. But we often think we do the decision later. But that is not the point. We have to take the decision now, and then, bless you, and then take little steps. So every journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And at the end, I would like to tell you the question that the voice asked me in one of my darkest hours. If you know with such a clearness what you want to experience in life, why you didn't do so? Thank you.